Archaeologists say writings on an ancient tablet confirm there was a global flood recently. God's children were abuzz with the news that Noah's Ark was allegedly found in Turkey. This is a significant shift in biblical history because it marks the end and a new beginning. The discovery of Noah's Ark would be an unparalleled archaeological find. Throughout history, thousands of individuals have searched various mountains for the remains of this wooden structure, described in the Bible and in numerous legends from cultures around the world. But is this information true? And if this ark is really found, what historical evidence did they find in this ship? I invite you to watch until the end of this video to clarify these questions. Has Noah's Ark been found? The biblical account of Noah tells of God instructing Noah to build a giant ark to spare his family and pairs of animals from an impending flood, meant to destroy the evil and wickedness running rampant on earth. Ancient reports speak of the ark as being readily accessible to certain groups of people, even describing an annual festival that supposedly took place on a mountain slope to commemorate the ark's landing. Pieces of the ark were allegedly taken and used as amulets. In the past century, dozens of individuals have claimed to have located the ark. Most of these modern searches have focused on Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. Recently, Noah's Ark is said to have come to rest on the mountains of Ararat following a 150-day flood about 5,000 years ago. It is hard to imagine a large wooden structure surviving the elements for more than 4,000 years. Also, if Mount Ararat truly were the landing place, how could the Ark have survived this volcano's numerous eruptions, which continued until 1840? These factors have not stopped the search for the Ark or the reported sightings of it, but this is not surprising. If it is God's will, He will allow it to happen. Researchers now believe they've found evidence of human activity near the mountain's boat-shaped formation from between 5,500 and 3,000 BC. Let's first consider what the researchers from 3 universities in Turkey and the US claim to have found at the Giresunpınar Formation in the mountains of Ararat. This evidence of human activity includes clay materials, marine materials, and seafood dated to between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago. Take note that the global flood described in Genesis was 4,500 years ago. Archaeologists with the Noah's Ark Scans project said that using advanced 3D scans, they have located a giant shape in the Turkish mountain. The proportions match the biblical descriptions of Noah's Ark. The discovery was made at the Giresunpınar site on Mount Tenderek in eastern Turkey. The area believed to be the location of Mount Ararat, the mythical resting place of Noah's Ark as described in the book of Genesis. The formation's initial discovery was made by a Kurdish farmer in 1948. And it gained recognition when Turkish Army Captain İlhan Giresunpınar spotted the site in 1951 during a NATO mapping mission. According to Noah's Ark Scans project researcher Andrew Jones and lead scientist Dr. Faye Aysel of the Department of Geophysical Engineering, Geophysics Department of Istanbul University, 3D scans of the area discovered a formation of the exact length of the ark, detailed in the Bible as being around 150 meters, or 300 cubits in biblical terms. Jones said such parallel lines and right angles below the surface are something you would not expect to see in a natural geologic formation, but these results are what you would expect to see if this is a man-made boat. Matching the biblical requirements of Noah's Ark expeditions will continue to search for the Ark. While it probably has not survived the elements for thousands of years, we can be confident that it really did exist, because God's word has infallibly recorded the account of the flood. Our Ark Encounter-themed attraction shows the feasibility of this famous vessel and uses the biblical account of Noah, the Ark, and the flood to share the gospel of Jesus Christ. Whether Noah's Ark is found or not does not change what we believe about the Bible. God's word is true, whether or not Noah's Ark is ever discovered. What about you? What do you think about the ability to find Noah's Ark? Tell us in the comments below. What was inside Noah's Ark? In the scenario that scientists actually find Noah's Ark, they will certainly be very curious about what happened on this ark. We find billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. We find rock layers that stretch across vast distances, or layers bent while still soft. We find fossil graveyards where land and sea creatures are buried in a jumbled mess. We find miles of sediment that were laid down by water. In other words, we find exactly what we'd expect geologically if there really was a global flood. You might be wondering how many animals were brought onto Noah's Ark, and how much room this would have taken up inside the Ark. Exactly how many animals were brought into the Ark is not stated in the scriptures. All that it says is that the unclean animal kinds will go in by pairs, male and female, and the clean animals will go in by 7 pairs, according to their kinds. You can find this in Genesis 7. This provision allows for God to select the animals and then have them come to the Ark, timing their travel and arrival so that everything is ready within the 120-year deadline that God established. Evidently, Noah was not a genetic expert, nor was it given to him to decide which animals to select and which to leave behind. The animals selected would represent a wide enough range of genetic varieties. God gave Noah the dimensions of the Ark, including 3 levels divided into sections, because God also selected the animals. He would be in the best position to determine whether or not the animals selected would fill the Ark. According to many, Noah's Ark would split in half when at sea. This true? A wooden boat that big would break up and sink pretty quickly in any sort of seas. Indeed, it probably would sink even if gradually lifted by slowly rising, dead calm water. The largest wooden ship ever built, the Wyoming, was a good 60 feet shorter than the Ark was supposed to be. Even so, it only stayed afloat because of continual pumping, and it still sank in a heavy storm in 1924. According to one tradition, refuse was stored on the lowest of the Ark's 3 decks, humans and clean beasts on the second, and the unclean animals and birds on the top. A differing interpretation described the refuse as being stored on the topmost deck, from where it was shaved into the sea through a trapdoor. In an unorthodox interpretation, the 12th century Jewish commentator Abraham ibn Ezra interpreted the Ark as a vessel that remained underwater for 40 days, after which it floated to the surface. The current status of Noah's Ark can only be accurately revealed when the scientists who claim to have found it unveil the true image of the Ark. 5 final resting places of Noah's Ark have been considered. Now, we will focus on 5 of the most popular locations for the Ark's final resting place. 4 of the locations are on or very near Mount Ararat, while the other site lies hundreds of miles from this famous peak. Site 1, the Jerupaner site, popularized in the 1980s by Ron Wyatt and others, is an arc-shaped formation lying approximately 15 miles from the summit of Mount Ararat. Wyatt claimed to have found numerous artifacts in the vicinity to corroborate his claims. In the past few years, the Jerupaner site has again risen to prominence after being promoted on several websites as the real Noah's Ark, but don't expect too much. Despite its Ark-like appearance and popularity, Christian geologists and archaeologists who would love to find the Ark and who have visited the location have soundly rejected the Jerupaner site as nothing more than a geologic formation. Several similar-looking formations can be found in the region, as a simple Google Maps search can confirm. These formations are caused by mud flowing around eroded outcrops of basalt lava flows. Site 2, the Ahora Gorge, is an enormous chasm on the northeast side of Mount Ararat, dropping more than 1 mile from the peak of the mountain. The Ahora Gorge has been at the forefront of Ark seeker expeditions for about a century. Interest in this location was sparked by the claims of George Hagopian. He claimed that when he was a young boy in 1908, his uncle took him up Mount Ararat to the Ahora Gorge area. Hagopian said that they found something that looked like a large ship partially buried by snow and ice. He claimed his uncle stood on a rock pile and lifted him up so that he could walk on the roof. At least a dozen expeditions have explored the Ahora Gorge since Hagopian reportedly walked on the Ark's roof. However, to date, none of these adventurers have been able to find the remains of Noah's Ark at the Ahora Gorge, even though they have used satellite imagery and explorers have searched the gorge when the glacier in it has melted back. It is very tempting to dismiss Hagopian's incredible claims as the imaginations of a young child, Consider the following complications with his story. Hagopian offered conflicting reports of his adventure. Was he 8 years old or 10 years old at the time? Was it in 1905 or 1908? It is also hard to imagine a youngster making this very difficult and dangerous journey without proper training. Perhaps the greatest problem with claiming this site as the resting place of the Ark is the fact that the Ahura Gorge is on Mount Ararat. Genesis 8:4 says the Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat. In other words, the Ark landed in the region of the land of Ararat. As mentioned above, this dormant volcano last erupted in 1840, and many much larger eruptions occurred during the post-flood ice age. The Ahura Gorge was largely constructed by an 1840 earthquake and the resultant catastrophic erosion. Yet even though these Ark searchers say the Ark could have slid down after the gorge formed, it still begs the question as to how a wooden structure would have survived being buried by the molten lavas that erupted since the flood ended. Site 3, the Ararat anomaly, is another spot that has caught the eye of Ark researchers, known as the Ararat anomaly. In 1949, photographs of the northwest side of Mount Ararat were taken by a United States intelligence agency. A large structure can be seen jutting out of the ice and snow near the middle of the photograph. This object has captured the imagination of Ark hunters because it resembles a portion of a large ship. Of course, this anomaly may simply be a rock outcropping with just the right amount of ice and snow melted away to give the illusion of a boat-shaped object. A satellite image taken in 2003 has breathed new life into the popularity of the Ararat anomaly. Presumably taken of the same spot on the mountain, this overhead shot shows an elongated structure that appears to have similar dimensions to Noah's Ark. As far as I know, no expedition has explored the site of the Ararat anomaly, but it would certainly be a stretch to conclude that these pictures are definitive proof of the Ark's remains on Mount Ararat. The object in the images may be nothing more than a natural rock formation. Perhaps that's why Ark searchers have not been inclined to explore this anomaly. Site 4, the Arat Nami expedition. In April 2010, a team of evangelical Christian explorers claimed to have found evidence of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat during their expedition there 2 years earlier, high up a prominent canyon on the south face of the mountain. The team represents Noah's Ark Ministries International, also known as NAMI, which is part of the Hong Kong-based media evangelism. This group claims to be a Christian organization committed to developing a Christian media presence to promote the message of Jesus Christ. This group claimed to have found, or were told about, 7 wooden compartments buried on Mount Ararat, which they believe were part of Noah's Ark. They even produced a video showing team members presumably inside one of these wooden structures. Although we would be delighted if the Ark had been found, this discovery is likely a hoax. This is not to accuse NAMI of perpetrating the hoax, but there is a real possibility that they were victims of a fraud enacted by a Kurdish man called Parachute. Dr. Randall Price and Dr. Don Patton were the experts invited to be part of the expedition, but they were never permitted to see the site and were soon dropped from the team. They have documented many of the inconsistencies between what was reported and what they found in their research. Furthermore, would a site that endured regular flooding remain in good shape for millennia? This mountain is a dormant volcano, and it likely emerged from the floodwaters too late for it to have been the mountain on which the Ark landed. Site 5, Mount Suleiman. The Bible states that the Ark landed on the mountains of Ararat. Many people believe that Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey is in view here. But the Bible merely places the Ark on a mountain in the region of Ararat, called Urartu in ancient times. As such, it is certainly possible that the Ark landed on a mountain other than Mount Ararat. A military veteran named Ed Davis claimed to have seen the remains of Noah's Ark during World War II, while he was stationed in Iran. Based on his understanding of this report, Bob Cornucci of the Base Institute led expeditions to Mount Suleiman, also called the Throne of Solomon, in 2005 and 2006 to explore an alternative site for Noah's Ark. Cornucci provided several details about the site that he believes is a candidate for the remains of Noah's Ark. His team found rocks that were uncannily beam-like in appearance, over 13,000 feet up the mountain, a worship shrine, and fossilized clams in abundance on the top of an adjoining peak. Cornucci also points to the wide variety of ecosystems in the region and the 1965 rediscovery of the Caspian horse, believed by some to be the most ancient variety of domestic horses. Despite these assertions, but the biggest problem is that Mount Suleiman lies 250 miles east of the farthest known reaches of the ancient Urartu region. As such, this mountain doesn't match the biblical description that the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, flood, or fiction. The fact that scientists continuously find signs that this ship appeared, but there is no convincing evidence, makes many people skeptical about whether this flood really happened or not. Stories of destructive floods and those who survived them predate the Hebrew Bible, the oldest parts of which are thought to have been written in the 8th century BC. Legends about a deluge that destroys civilization at the behest of a supernatural deity can be found in multiple Mesopotamian texts, from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written around the early 2nd millennium BC, to a recently deciphered Babylonian cuneiform tablet from about 1750 BC describing how the ark was built. Could these flood myths be based in fact? There does seem to be geological evidence that there was a major flood in the Black Sea region about 7,500 years ago, says National Geographic explorer Eric Klein, an archaeologist at George Washington University. But scientists disagree on the extent of that event, just as historians of the era differ on whether writings about a deluge were inspired by real life. It seems likelier that floods were simply experienced in different places and at different times, and that those events naturally made their way into the world's oral and written lore. Complicating the issue even further, scholars differ on the precise location of Noah's Ark. According to the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Genesis, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat, located in the ancient kingdom of Urartu, an area that now includes Armenia and parts of eastern Turkey, and Iran, not the single iconic peak that bears its name today. Explorer Jody McNeese, an archaeologist at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, said, "We have no way of placing Noah, if he really existed, and the flood, if there really was one, in time and space. The only way you could determine that would be if you had an authentic ancient inscription. And even then," she points out, "such an inscription could refer to another Noah or another flood. That hasn't stopped the proliferation of pseudo-archaeology that upholds the Bible as literal truth." Sometimes, you need to remind yourself this: the story of Noah's Ark is often interpreted as a metaphorical or allegorical representation of God's judgment, redemption, and the preservation of life, rather than a scientific account. Science and faith often approach explanations differently. The biblical account of Noah's Ark might not align with scientific evidence or understanding due to its allegorical nature. Never mind, people interpret biblical stories differently. While some view them as literal truth, others see them as spiritual lessons that aren't meant to be scientifically scrutinized.